Good evening, everyone. This is the Middle School Enrollment Policy Review Town Hall for families of special education students. Welcome. We will be starting shortly. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is the Middle School Enrollment Policy Review Town Hall for families of special education students. We will be starting in just a few moments. We want to let a few other folks join us, and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining us this evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is the Middle School Enrollment Policy Review Town Hall for families of special education students. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm here with Berkeley Unified's Admissions Manager, Mr. Francisco Martinez. Mr. Martinez, thank you for joining us.
Thank you and good evening.
And I am Stacy Smith. I am the consultant hired by the school district to help with the community engagement process related to the middle school enrollment policy review. We will be discussing many things this evening. We're going to start with an overview of the enrollment process, the history and background, what the enrollment policy and process looks like now. And then we're going to get into a discussion of the current policy alternatives under review. And we have some maps to share with you. And throughout, we will be taking your questions and comments.
I'm sorry, Stacy, do we want to, there's only 4 people. Do we want to upgrade them as panelists so that they can see everything?
I'm going to suggest that we wait just a few more minutes since it's just shortly after 6, and let's see how many others join us.
Okay.
But thank you. Actually, what we're talking about is if it's a small group this evening, we will try to make this as informal a gathering as possible, so that we will all be able to just chat. So let's just give everyone a few more moments to join us. And in the meantime, I'd like to share a little bit about what we're going to do this evening. Excuse me. We're going to speak a little bit about the policy, about why the policy is being reviewed right now. And then we're going to pause and check in and take your questions about what we've covered so far. There's a lot to cover this evening. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask those questions. Then the current policy alternatives to be considered, and we want to take your suggestions as well. Throughout the review process, we are holding a space for your policy alternatives that perhaps the district has not considered. At the end, we're going to take a quick poll, and then we'll close for the evening. The first question that we have is, who is here with us this evening? And so if you have a smartphone, we would love it if you could scan this QR code and take a very quick survey to let us know a little bit about who you are and who your child is. If you don't have your smartphone with you, or if you are like me with a smartphone that doesn't work with QR codes very well all the time, this is the link to that survey. I have just put it in the chat. Take just a moment. Give everybody an opportunity to answer those quick questions before we move on. Great. And then I'd like to just go over the format. We have the main purpose of our time together this evening is to share information with you, but to gather your questions and comments. The last half hour of this session this evening will be just live interactions, questions, answers, comments, conversation. We will not be taking a break this evening, so please, if you need to get up and stretch, move around, grab something to drink, we will be here. We're planning to spend at least an hour with you, if not more. We will pause during the presentation so that you can ask questions about what we've already reviewed. And please don't raise your hand until we pause to take questions. You can put your questions in the Q&A on the bottom of your screen at any time. If there are a lot of folks who join us over the course of the evening, I'm just going to ask everyone to please just be aware of the time that we take for our questions and comments so that we share the time this evening with those around us. And if there's something that you ask or that you don't get a chance to get to, or that we don't get a chance to hear, please make sure it's in the Q&A. And we will be saving a transcript of that Q&A, and we will be reviewing it after the meeting. For anything that we don't get to this evening, we will try to answer questions and get back to folks with information, either in the next round of meetings or in communications to the community. I'm going to do a time check. It's about 6:08. I think that, allowing folks to enter as, elevating folks to panelists makes a lot of sense. So do you want to explain what that means, Mr. Martinez?
Yes, so we are going to upgrade you to panelists, and what you will be able to join us. It would be then it functions like a regular Zoom meeting where you will be able to see the other people that are in the panel, and you will be able to ask questions and participate. Just if you will have a question, there's a raise button hand at the bottom of your screen where if you have a question, you can just raise your hand, and then we will answer the question. It's like we do that to create a much more informal setting where you're able to participate in the meeting. And be able to be part, and it's a little bit less restrictive.
We are recording this meeting. It will be posted on the Berkeley Unified's YouTube channel. So if you do not want to have your image shown, please just turn off your camera. And let's see. You don't have to get promoted to panelist. We will know that you are here with us, and we will take that into account. Okay. Great, thank you. So let's go over a little bit about the background and history. And again, we will pause for questions after this section. The core, the foundation, I'm sorry, did you want to say something, Mr. Martinez?
No.
Okay, sorry. The foundation of the middle school enrollment policy is Berkeley's commitment to diverse integrated schools. In 1968, the district became the first major public school system to voluntarily integrate its schools. And if you watch the Democratic presidential debates a few years ago, You heard our current Vice President Kamala Harris speak about being a student, a young child here in the Berkeley Unified School District during that time. So this is a foundational value of the district. The district believes that diversity in school communities helps with critical thinking skills, advances educational and occupational aspirations. It basically enriches the educational experience of all students. It encourages positive relationships across racial and economic lines. It fosters appreciation of students from different backgrounds. And it also fosters equitable distribution of resources. And finally, it promotes students participating in a diverse, pluralistic society. It just helps us, as adults moving on in our lives. So here's an overview of the current enrollment process. Mr. Martinez?
Yeah, so in 2004, the school district was looking into drafting a new student assignment policy. And the goal at that time was to expand what the definition of diversity meant as in regards to the student assignment policy. So at this time in 2004, in the policy that was adopted, the board adopted a policy that included, that it wanted in a student assignment plan that included parent education, parent income, and student ethnicity or race. Parent education and parent income, we get it from the 2000, we got it at that time from the 2000 census. So that information, we get it from the census, whenever there's information that is updated, we look at it and then we update our student assignment plan based on that. The ethnicity, we don't look at ethnicity at the individual student, but we look at the historical race and ethnicity. We aggregated 4 to 5 years of data into that to make sure that we included some level of ethnicity, because the board wanted something to be included, but does not include the individual kid. It includes, like students that have been in the district. And this is a way to when, because at the same time that the school district was being sued over the student assignment plan, and then this went up to the appellate court, and they found that the way that we were making student assignments based on the 3 criteria, that it was legal and it was constitutional. Next, please. So, so I was telling you, like that we look at 3 different factors: parent income, parent education, and student, like historical data from student ethnicity. And so we created this map that we call it a composite diversity map, because it includes the 3 variables that I described: parent education, income, and the historical race and ethnicity. We update the data, the map when the data becomes available. And this is the map that we use to assign students to the elementary schools. So using this map, there is a wide area, kind of a rectangular area, and that is like, yeah, so you get is Cal. And so the roughly diversity category 1 in here is, and this is where we find the students that have, on the aggregate, not everybody, because we don't look at the individual students, we look at the aggregate. You see that there's a little blocks, they look like blocks, we call those planning areas. And they are, how large they are, they're like between about 4 to 6 city blocks. So, and some of them are a little bit smaller and the other ones are larger. And we did that because when we look at this data from the census tracts were pretty large. So they were not useful to us. And then we also looked, do we use city blocks? And then we said, well, they're too small. So we wanted something in between. So we were settled on what is called the planning area. So roughly, this is where we find the students with the least education, least parent income, and there are more students of color. We find it in West Berkeley, which is the yellow area. Diversity category 3 is the color blue. and that is in the Berkeley Hills, and that's where we find the families with the most education, the most income, and the least students of color. And diversity category 2 is the purple, and this is where everybody kind of meets where they meet, and so and we call that diversity category 2, and this is the purple area. Each of the attendance zones for elementary school, they have a portion that is blue, portion that is purple, and a portion that is yellow. And what we do is that we assign the students proportionally to the elementary school. So for instance, if 30% of the students come from the blue area, 30% of the students in the elementary schools in that attendance zone will be distributed to the schools. The same would be for the students that come from purple and yellow. And this is the way that we achieve not only socioeconomic diversity in the schools, but also racial diversity at the school level. Next, please. So in this map, we call this as an attendance zone map. Again, it's the same map of Berkeley. The only difference is like now we're showing you the attendance zones. If you remember from the previous part, you see that what is now red and kind of yellowish and green, each of the attendance zones, like I said before, has a portion that is blue, purple, and yellow. But this is the attendance zone. So like each of the elementary schools, they group into attendance zones that run, like that they cover part of the hills are in each of the attendance zones, also part of the flats in mid Berkeley. If you look in the middle, there's a little white line in the middle of the map, and that tells us the attendance zone for middle school. Like on the left-hand side of your screen is King, and on the right side is Willard. If you see all of the red area is in the King zone, and all of the green area is in the Willard zone. Whereas the central zone, it is split between both King and Willard, and that is you can see that by that white line that is in the maps. There's also some little blocks that you see that are white within the map, and that's where the schools are in the district. Just so you get a sense of where we are. And so we did the attendance zones, and on top of that, we put in the diversity categories. And so in this way, we look, and that's how we keep the schools diverse and integrated at the elementary schools. Next, please. In this map, we see much more clearly the attendance zones for King and Willard. So the orange is King and the green is Willard. Again, it's like, remember that I told you that all of the Kings, the north zone is in the King zone, and all of the Willard, all of the southeast zone is in the Willard zone, and in the middle is the central zone is split between Willard and King. So this map for the two middle schools was created in 1994. And that's when the district went through a process that was called reconfiguration, where the schools, the elementary schools, they used to be reconfigured differently. Some people may remember that at this time, the schools, they used to be like kindergarten through the third grade, and that was kind of primary. And then they would go to schools that were 4th to 6th grade. Then they would go to junior high, that was 7th and 8th grade. So in 1995, Longfellow, when reconfiguration happened, the school district knew that they needed an additional middle school to accommodate the new grade that was being given to the middle schools, the 6th grade, whereas before they were going to 4th and 6th. So the junior highs at that point, they were still Willard and King, but they needed to create a new school to accommodate that. And Longfellow became that middle school. But it was not they did not designate the board at that time in 1995. They didn't give Longfellow an attendance zone. What happened at that time is that Longfellow was created as a magnet school, and which also was going to be the smallest middle school in the district with about 500 kids, and the school was rebuilt at its position location, so that was rebuilt, and but Longfellow as a magnet school, they were given additional things. For instance, there was transportation to the 6th grade, which was not provided to King or Willard. Then Longfellow was also given a 7-period class where students could take more electives. And then also Longfellow applied and received a magnet funding that lasted for 3 years, but the school needed to become a school of choice. So families needed to choose to go to that school in order to be assigned. And that is one of the things when they got the grant from the federal government. So and sometimes, like once there was, unfortunately, over the years, there were fewer families that didn't request Longfellow, and so we couldn't accommodate all the students at King and Willard. So then we would assign students where we had spaces available at the school. But again, this map is very simply to illustrate the attendance zone for King and the attendance zone for Willard. Next, please. The middle school policy has not been reviewed since 1994. And since then, like I kind of alluded that many demographic and enrollment change, trends have taken place since then. Right now, so what we have is that we have 3 middle schools, and that the 3 middle schools are not segregated, but that are segregated and not integrated. If you remember in the beginning, Ms. Smith was telling you about a statement of beliefs about diversity and the values and what it can achieve. So none of the middle schools at this point reflect the socioeconomic diversity that the district is trying to achieve in the schools. And the 3 middle schools are impacted by the segregation. If this trend continues, and there's no change, then the same pattern will continue in the near future. So this, very briefly, this is data that we gathered from the 3 middle schools, and the 3 middle schools, we look at 3 years of data from 2018 to 2021. So it's 3 years of data. And we were looking to see, just to illustrate how diverse are the schools by race and ethnicity. So what I'm just gonna read the blue color. So King is in the left side, Longfellow is in the middle column, and Willard is on the right-hand side. At this time, using 3 years of data, King Middle School, 50% of the students are white, which is the blue color. Whereas for Longfellow, it is only 19%, and it is 48% for Willard. So you can see that the schools, even by just looking at the colors, you'll see that they're not very similar, but they're very there's differences between all of the colors. Next, please. If you remember, like I talked to you like briefly and before using the map about the diversity categories, that we have the 3 diversity categories: diversity category 1 that was in the flats, diversity category 2 kind of the middle, and diversity category 3 that was in the Berkeley Hills. So when we mapped the students and we were trying to determine again, who are the students that are attending our middle schools, and how are they represented using the diversity map that we have. And so we used, it's the same students as we showed you before from 2018 to 21. We just look at the average of those 3 years. And I'm just gonna use like now diversity category 1 to illustrate that. If you look at King, and the color yellow, which is diversity category 1, and is roughly the flats in Berkeley. 37% of the students that attend King come from the flats, and so that's 37%. Whereas if you look at Longfellow, you see the 71% of the students that attend Longfellow come from diversity category 1, which is the flats in Berkeley, and for Willard, it is 42%. So as you can see, the schools are not similar in using these 2 ways to measure like who is attending the schools, one by diversity categories and one by looking at the ethnicity of the students. And we did this by looking at 3 years worth of data. I think you're muted, Stacy.
Of course I am. So basically, in 2019, the board recognized that, that this was an issue and directed the superintendent to recognize basically the magnitude of the issue. Not only was this an issue, but it was a big issue, and asked the superintendent to re-examine the middle school enrollment policy. That process, the review process, was originally delayed because of the pandemic, which is how we find ourselves here right now. The review process was originally set to be done by November of this year, but the board made the decision about a month ago to extend the timeline for that process. It is expected to be completed in fall 2022, and any changes to the policy will take effect in the 2023-2024 school year. So I also just want to highlight that we are here this evening as part of the community engagement piece of that process, but there are other factors, many other important factors that are being reviewed by the district. That includes not only looking at school diversity, but also things like future growth, how, distance from school students would be, siblings, the quality of programs across schools, and other factors. Transportation is one of those factors that is under review. And so there's a lot happening right now, and there will be more information about that shared with you, of course, over the next year. So here is just a quick overview of the engagement process. We kicked off the community engagement process in the spring of this year. And we created a dedicated place on the Berkeley website. There's a quick link from the main page of the Berkeley website, and Berkeley Unified website, and I encourage you to visit that webpage. It has an overview of much of what we're covering this evening, as well as the maps that we're going to be sharing with you, so that you can zoom in and take a closer look at them after this evening. It has videos, the town halls that we did last week. It has we did one town hall in Spanish for folks who who might prefer to listen to this information in Spanish. It has an overview of the survey, a summary of the June 21 survey that we did, the community survey, which I'm going to speak a little bit about in a moment. And all of that information is translated in both English and Spanish. We also have meeting dates posted on that website, and we will continue to post additional information. For example, we're planning to do a survey this fall, and we will have information posted on the site there, and eventually there will be a summary report posted there as well. Here we are in fall 2021, and we're continuing on with our engagement activities. We're going to be doing a lot of this through the next year. There'll be meetings like this town hall. There'll be informal focus groups. There'll be more surveys. There'll be, we're looking for multiple different ways to engage with folks, and in the most meaningful way possible. And then by November 2022, we will, the superintendent will bring his recommendations about the middle school policy to the board, at which point they will make their decision. We're going to get to questions in just a moment. Ms. Davis, I see you raised your hand. We're almost to that check-in point. Just wanted to share that the school community confirmed again in June, when they took this survey, that having diverse integrated schools communities is a key value. And so we sent a survey out to TK through Rising 8th grade families. Some of you may have taken it. 66% of families chose an enrollment policy alternative that created more diverse school communities. Those are the same alternatives that we're going to look at this evening. 20% wanted to leave the current policy in place, and 14% were undecided, unsure, or just other. And and this survey from June, just like our conversation this evening, is a snapshot of a point in time. And so we're going to be having a lot of these, and all of this information is going to go into a report to the superintendent. My job is to make sure that your questions and comments are raised up and heard, and also to make sure that when the district has information for you, that you get it. Okay, and here we are at our check-in. Now we have some folks who joined us. Before we jump in, I'm going to offer again to, because we have a small group this evening, I'm going to invite those who have not been made panelists to once again join us and become a panelist. That means that you don't need to be unmuted. You can raise your hand and just speak. And for those of you who prefer not to join us as panelists, that's totally fine. Please do raise your hand. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. Okay, and Ms. Davis, you have a question.
Yes, hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for joining us this
Okay,
evening.
perfect. One of the points of data that I did not see in the presentation is looking at the diversity of schools based on headwinds and tailwinds for students, and the number of kids on various caseloads of the special education department, or number of kids with IEPs. I know that when we do kindergarten enrollment, there's a zone, and the zone has, like, say, example 5 kindergartens. And I'm assuming in Francisco, you can speak more to this, is that the admissions department will look at the number of kids coming in with IEPs into kindergarten and then sort of balance that. But with the potential of doing the three middle school zones, there's not any balance. So any kid in that address is going to go to that middle school that they would be assigned to, unless we're doing the feeder school model. So I'm just wondering if you've thought about how you might balance the number of children with IEPs in the middle schools if we're not doing the feeder school model where they're already balanced at elementary. I guess that's my first question.
And let's pause there, okay? Mr. Martinez, I just want to, because it's a good question. I just want to make sure Mr. Martinez has an opportunity to answer.
Okay. Hi, Vicky. Haven't seen you in a while. It's like Vicky and I go back a long way. So
yes.
So Vicky, as you know, like at the elementary school level, like I work with the special ed department in assigning kids. So like it's not my sole decision. Like like we let the kids run through the lottery at the elementary school level, and then I submit the results, and then they look at it, and then because I don't see like the IEPs that we have a whole special department for that. So we consult very tremendously, like me and the special ed department, like in all assignments, they look at this on the IEP, and they are the ones who keep track of the caseloads for the kids who are special ed. One of the things that in this process is to flesh out, like, what are some of the details? What are some of the things that we need to be looking at in order to do it? As you know, right now, Vicky, like Longfellow is the only school that has a CEC class, but King and Willard do not have any CEC classes. And so all of the kids from throughout the district go into Longfellow. And that is something that as we get closer and closer, we will be refining this. And it's like, at this point, it's good to hear from you and the questions. But we didn't look at the number of kids, because I know that like Longfellow, normally the kids that are assigned to them, because they get a proportionate amount of FTE depending on the class size and the kids that they have. So I am assuming that at one point, like we're going to be engaging a lot the special department to find out, like, if it were to be the feeder school model, what it will look like for those kids. And if we were to be an attendant zone, which it still is being refined, then we need to look to see who lives in that. But also, like, we need to look into kids that as you know, there's some kids that are coming in the 6th grade from private schools, that some of them may be special ed. So we also need to look at those kids as well. So we will be looking into that closely as we get closer to that. but it is a very important question that we need to have an answer to it at the end.
And Vicki, you said that you had more than one question. I'm going to ask if maybe we could just, you'd like to ask the next question, and then maybe we can give other folks an opportunity to also ask their questions. Please, if you do have questions, folks, tonight, please feel free to raise your hand or stick it into the Q&A. Okay.
So my second question was regarding the models, and I know you haven't necessarily presented that yet, but I'm wondering if there's been any discussion on having all 3 middle schools be like a lottery, where parents just rank them for second and third, and it's the same type of lottery that we do for elementary, and we just don't provide transportation, just like we don't normally provide transportation for middle school now, and what the thought on that would be.
And I'm going to say that's, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. I've just made a note of it. And I'd like to, if it's okay, get back to that once we talk about those alternatives.
Sure, that's fine. I might not be able to be here. I have another meeting, so I have to leave early, but that's okay as long as you're aware of that question and thinking about that as an option. That's fine.
Right. And as I said at the beginning, for those who've just joined us more recently, the district is holding open a space for suggestions just like yours, Vicki. Another alternative of a potential policy that, that should be raised and considered to see whether or not that's something that would work. And we've reserved a little bit of time at the end to take those ideas. So I appreciate that, since you might not be here with us, that you've raised that now. Does anybody else have any questions about what we have covered so far? The composite diversity map, the current enrollment process? If so, please raise your hand or type your question into the Q&A. Also, if you are somebody who has not been elevated to a panelist and you would like to be elevated and it didn't work for some reason, please let me know. Put something in that Q&A, and I will invite you to be a panelist again. I will try to elevate you again. And being a panelist just sort of means that we get to sit and look at each other and talk. So, okay. I don't think we have any other questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about what we just covered, Mr. Martinez?
No, I think I'm good. I think we can move on. I'll try to explain more things as we move on.
Okay, great. Then I will bring that next part of our presentation up.
So at this time, we're going to talk to you about the enrollment policy alternatives that are being considered. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
So so some of the things that as we were working through this, that we kept in mind was that that the sibling priority or preference that we have, it will continue to exist in all policy alternatives. So if there are kids that, let's say that you have and hypothetically, a kid that is in the 7th grade, and that regardless of any changes that or not that were to occur, is that once the kid that is in the 8th grade, the 6th grade would be able to join that sibling. So the sibling preference works for kids that need to be in the middle school grades, just like it works for kids that they are in the middle school grades at the school district. Right now, transportation is not provided to middle school students. The only ones that get transportation is kids that have IEPs, and it's in their IEP that they need to get transportation. But the school district is exploring the implications under each scenario, what the transportation is going to look like. Please know that the maps that you're going to be seeing are not final. They do not represent any decision. The maps are only there to convey ideas and the thinking and the conceptual idea that is being provided to you. They're not final in any way. The board has not made any decisions on any of them. It's more to elicit discussion as we went forward. Also, keep in mind as we're talking about this, is like one of the things that we always need to be aware is how many students can each school hold? Because the 3 middle schools have different capacity. And by capacity, we mean like the number of classrooms that they have. Longfellow is the smallest school in the district, and they have capacity for about 500 students. Willer has capacity for about 700 kids. Right now they have about 650. Willer King has about 900 students, and sometimes they have had a capacity for like about 1,000 students. Again, please remember that we're looking for alternatives and models of student assignment for the middle schools that would work for the 3 middle schools, because we're looking at the 3 middle schools as a solution, not as a single school that we're looking at. So an option, the very first option is leave the system that we have in place, not make any changes. So the King will keep their attendance zone. Willer will keep their own attendance zone, in this case, green for Willer, orange for King, and Willer being in a district-wide middle school. So, so one of the things one of the pros about this is, the community is familiar with the middle schools. They know what the attendance zones for King and for Willer. But one of the things is that, should we do that, is like the current balance, the lack of the school not being integrated and being segregated, it will continue to persist and through to the middle schools. Option 2 has been like, and in this case we're going to be looking at as creating an attendance zone for Longfellow. And this is a draft map. It's not a final map. This is our thinking of what it could look like, and where potentially an attendance zone would be considered. So again, if you look on the left-hand side, the color that is kind of a little of reddish, that would be the attendance zone for King. It looks kind of similar to a large degree of what it was. And the attendance zone for Willer is the purplish color, but in the central zone, we have carved out an attendance zone which is in the green for Longfellow. People have said, like, why don't you just assign all of the kids in the central zone into Longfellow? Unfortunately, Longfellow does not have the capacity to serve all of the kids in the central zone, because it's just way too many kids in that central zone, and the school is very small, like 500 kids. So it doesn't have the capacity. The only way that it could be done is to build up more floors, for Longfellow, because anybody who has gone to Longfellow will know that that it is it has a small footprint. It's not very large, that school. Under this scenario, we assumed the two-way immersion program for Longfellow, that is a Longfellow. So those are the kids that are Sylvia Mendez. They would continue on at Longfellow. So we assume that each of the little planning areas, if you see that they're a more busy now, and this is because we put in the number of 5th graders that are in each of the planning areas. So you'll see that in some, like, this is like 1 or 2, and some of this is 10. And the most densely populated area is around Malcolm X. So it's in South Berkeley, and that is really dense in there. And that's because there is a lot of apartment complex around that area. Whereas when there's single home dwellings, you see that there's fewer kids, and that's because, you know, there are fewer kids. But when you have apartments, there's more families, and that's what happens. We also consider, since this is going to be a new attendance zone for Longfellow, that maybe, because the students at King, you know, like they have been walking to the school or being driven to school, the same for Willard, as an incentive would be to create a express bus, like a school bus. It would be a school bus, but it is it's a bus that would be coming from with the same walking distance, like a 1.5 mile. That's what kids at the elementary school, if they live 1.5 miles, they don't get a bus. But if they live farther than 1.5, they get a bus. So in this case, it would be like a express bus that would come in from the hills to the flats, as express bus, not a bus like at elementary school level where they are going and picking up kids from throughout the attendance zone. This would be kind of like, if you think about it, think of a straight line that comes in from with a few stops from the hills to the school, and to make it as fast as possible for the students to get to school. So this would be like, again, and we're waiting for data from the 2020 census to like refine this map a little bit more. But the essence and the idea would be this, is to create an attendance zone for the school, where the school would be integrated, all of the middle schools, not only racially, but socioeconomically at the schools. So this would be the goal of this map and the attendance zones. Next, please. Another model that has been discussed is to create a cluster of schools that fit into a middle school. So that's another option. That's option 3. And so there are things about like that look appealing to having the school feeder pattern, but there's one of the things. What the benefits is that the kids stay together from elementary to middle school and then on to high school. So that looks very appealing, but there's challenges. It's a little bit more complex to implement than one would think, and it has to do because in our elementary schools, remember that we have an attendance zone for the middle schools, 3 attendance zones, and with the goal of moving kids from the hills to the flats and from the flats to the hills, and the middle school students as well, to create an environment that is diverse and is integrated at the schools. So that's one of the challenges, and we're going to illustrate it in a minute. So we have created one scenario for the 3 middle schools where, like, looking at a feeder pattern. And we also remember that I told you about the size of the schools. We needed to be fully aware of what of the number of kids, because we need to make them fit not only now but into the future. So next, please. So so this is what it would look like, and one of the things that we did. This is a map of Berkeley again. We and with the planning areas and with the number of kids that live in each of the planning areas. And so the lighter color basically says, you see like there's a lot of ones, and then as the color changes, it could go like, you know, like where there are more than 6 students. So we are, so we did that. So if you look at this, we at King, we assigned Berkeley Arts Magnet, Craigmont, Ruth Actig, and Thousand Oaks. We said, like, you know, what if these kids went to King? So one of the things that this map looks very similar to the map when I was telling you about the attendances for King and for Willard, because I told you that all of the kids in the North Zone attend King, and all of the in the Central Zone kids attend both King and Willard, and the Southeast Zone kids, they attend Willard. So as you can see, you know, like that this map, nothing much changes for that. But we couldn't accommodate all of the kids for all of, you know, like all of the schools, because again, we needed to be aware like how many kids each of the schools can handle. And so and under this scenario, we gave, you know, like I said, these 4 schools to King. So let's look at the next map. And this map is much more problematic. As you can see, this map is basically kids for Willard. So this is a feeder school for Willard. So it looks, one of the things that we did is that we assigned Emerson and John Muir, because those schools I told you before, they're in the Southeast zone. And so they normally fit into that school. So we, so in order to eliminate a lot of the transportation, so we assign them to that. So, but now we needed to look, that those two schools, they're small schools, they're not sufficient for Willard. So we needed to look at more students. So we added Washington and we added Rosa Parks. Kind of like we said, like, they're the closest in proximity to the school. So we look at that. But as you can see in here, because Rosa Parks is in the north zone, so any kids, if under this scenario, any kid that is at Rosa Parks, they're coming in from throughout the north zone. So it is from like around Thousand Oaks all the way to West Berkeley. And then because we assigned them Washington, you see the same pattern, that kids are coming in from the center, because they're coming in from the central zone. So we have kids that are that live close to Craigmont, in the central zone, to kids that live in the flats. So what this map tells us is that in order to achieve something like that, there would be a lot of movement of kids coming in and to Willard from from all over Berkeley. So that's what I said, like, this is one of the challenges when you have a feeder school pattern, given the fact that we have schools that are integrated at elementary school and they come from the entire attendance zones in Berkeley. So having one school in one attendance zone affects this map. So let's move to the next map. So in the next map, this is the feeder school pattern for Longfellow. So Longfellow, again, is our smallest school in the district for middle school kids. And we needed to be very cognizant. And we actually began the process of the feeder school model. We began with Longfellow because we needed to assign the right schools to this school. So we assumed that Sylvia Mendez, which has the two-way immersion program, that they would continue to attend Longfellow. So we assigned those kids there, and the kids that we assigned in this model are all fifth grade kids. So like the numbers that you're seeing in these maps, they're fifth graders. But that was not enough. So we were looking for about 115 kids, plus about 60 that come from Sylvia Mendez, to be like about 160, 170 kids. So then we gave it Malcolm X. And then we also, but once we gave him Malcolm X, then we needed to find the right school that would have the right number of kids to accommodate them. We could, in this case, we couldn't give him Washington, we couldn't give them Rosa Parks, Craigmont, or any school like that, because if we did, we would give them too many kids by assigning Sylvia Mendez and Malcolm X. So, and so we get the only school that we could give them to make the numbers work would be Oxford. And so when we did that, and then you can see that because we gave them Malcolm X, you see that kids are coming in from the central zone. And that's because Malcolm X is a central zone and a southeast zone school. So you see that in this map. But you also see, Francisco, but it's like, I see more kids that come in from farther away and in the north zone. And that is because Sylvia Mendez is a district-wide two-way immersion school. So families from throughout Berkeley, they want their kids to be in the two-way immersion program. And the district does provide transportation from throughout the district to Sylvia Mendez if families want to attend that school. So that's why you see that there's a few kids in the north zone, and that's because Sylvia Mendez provides the two-way immersion program at Sylvia Mendez, and these families want to be there. So so this is the feeder school model. So again, each of the middle schools would be allocated a number of schools from the elementary schools, making sure that the schools could serve all of the kids. And the school that we needed to be most careful about who those kids were is Longfellow because of their small size and making sure that they could serve the kids in a feeder school model. At this time, one of the things and another option could come about, and Vicky raised this issue about why not just have an open choice for all of the middle schools in the district, and then you assign them how they like according to the choices, just like having an attendance zone per se for all of the middle schools, and then family just rank them. So that is that's what Vicky was suggesting earlier. Please note that no decisions have been made at this time. We are at this point, like we're doing the community engagement, presenting options to see what the community thinks about this process and the alternatives that have been explained at this time.
And here we are at the question and comment portion of our evening. One of the things that we mentioned at the beginning, I want to repeat for those of you who joined us a little bit later than that, and welcome, is that we have reserved a big chunk of time to take your questions and comments about all that we've covered this evening. So please raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and I note, or stick it in the Q&A. And I noticed that we do have something in the, we just have a comment saying that Vicky is leaving and coming back. So I invite you now to share your thoughts about what we just shared. Do you have any questions about any of the specific models? Thank you, Eloise. A comment that there is a lot of information to digest. Absolutely. Question by Heather. Will the final decision be made by community-wide vote? Actually, Heather, there is an extensive community engagement process. The board just extended that so that we're going to have a lot of opportunities for the community to ask questions and provide input throughout. As Mr. Martinez said, the maps may change depending on community input, but also other factors that the district is reviewing, such as transportation and programming, distance from schools, siblings, etc. The way the process is going to work is that there are these sort of parallel tracks where the district is doing review of these factors. We're doing the community engagement process. They are not separate, they feed into each other. But by fall 2022, the superintendent will be taking all of this information and providing a recommendation to the school board. And at that time, the school board will be making their decision about what to do about the policy. It could be to keep the current policy as it is. It could be to take one of the alternatives we've just discussed. It could be to choose an alternative that has not even been raised yet.
So Eloise is asking about whether there are other school districts that are dealing with this problem and how they're handling it. Two things, because I have been in communication with San Francisco Unified. I can tell you that San Francisco Unified is looking into attendance zones for their schools, because they are trying to have schools to be diverse. So their solution is, we want to create an attendance zone. So that's how they do it. Some time ago, West Contra Costa did something where they did a feeder pattern, but West Contra Costa is different than Berkeley. Like the West Contra Costa wasn't looking at diversity; they were just looking to accommodate kids, and so so they did a feeder school pattern. But for them, it was easier because they have neighborhood schools. So they look at one area, and so that neighborhood goes into that neighborhood middle school. And we haven't had neighborhood schools in Berkeley since 1965, 68, when the schools were integrated. So our pattern of enrollment is different than theirs. So yes, we have looked at different things, and those are the two, that I can tell you that I know of from off the top of my head.
Thank you, Eloise. So I'm thinking about, what are your thoughts on these different alternatives, or do you have a suggestion, like Vicki shared earlier, of a different alternative? And some of the things that we're looking to understand from you is, what do you like about each of the alternatives? What concerned you about each of the alternatives? And so I invite you to share, either, by typing into the Q&A or raising your hand and sharing with us now, maybe one thing you like and one thing that concerns you about the 3-zone map, or the feeder school alternative, or the current alternative.
And one of the things that we did, is that why we created maps instead of having a lot of text, because sometimes, when you can see it visually, it's sometimes easier to digest. I know, Eloise, it's a lot of information, and it's a long presentation. But we wanted you to understand, how we got here, like from the very beginning, and we dwell on this, and I'm saying, we have a lot of slides, but we needed to make sure that you understood how we got here from the beginning until the end. And so we thank you for the time that you had spent with us. I know it's an hour now, but and that's why we put different colors in it. Like, if you remember the diversity categories, how I use the same color as when we're using the maps, as we were using the bar chart, to make sure that all of those things, so that you have it in your head. You sometimes, if you think of I saw that map and they look like this, instead of trying to remember what the text said. So we did all of those things too. And you can, since all of those things are posted, just like Stacy said, on the district website, you can go and look at it at your own pace. And it includes a little bit of information to, and the slides were done in a way for them to stand on their own. So if you look at it, you said, oh, I remember now when we were talking about the feeder school, and this is what it looks like. And when Francisco was talking about the having an attendance zone, and where is that attendance zone? But again, it's remember that we are at this time looking at as drafts of what would, but think of it as the concept of what we're trying to the idea that we're trying to convey.
And I see that Vicki has a hand up. One of the things that I'm going to do is, Vicki, we're going to take your question, and then I know that it's a lot to process, but we do have a quick poll. It's anonymous. We're asking everybody what their initial preferences are based on what they know right now. So Vicki, we're gonna take your question. I'm putting a link to that poll in the chat for everyone. It's just, as I said, one question. It's anonymous, but we just sort of, at this moment of time, what do you think about what we just shared?
Hi there, thanks. Sorry about that. I'm trying to do 2 meetings at the same time. It's challenging. So I just wanted to reiterate that at the next follow-up meeting that we have with this group, as we continue going along this path, that if it would be possible to get some of that additional data that looks at the different proposals based on number of students with IEPs, number of students with 3 or higher headwinds, those kinds of things. I know that's not something that admissions typically looks at, but because this is specifically for the special families of kids with special needs, I feel like the special ed department would be able to provide that information, because I think that would definitely influence a choice and should influence the decision-making process. And then I wanted to loop back around to the idea of having all 3 schools be choice schools and have a lottery for all 3 schools, and whether or not Francisco can speak to whether or not he thinks that is a feasible option, or if it was discussed or considered yet at all.
Vicki, I did, you were not back yet. So I did raise under possible alternatives to the ones that we provided, where you said that what if it was like just having Berkeley be one attendance zone for the 3 middle schools, and then families just rank the schools, and then we assign them. Kind of like, that's your idea, I think. And I have thought about it myself, like, again, this is just me, like, but this has not been presented, but it also, one of the things that it, from what I can see, is that it would create also transportation concerns, that if it were to be, like, because right now it works at the elementary school because it's a much smaller area for the elementary schools. So, and we provide transportation to the middle schools, students. So one of my concerns would be, which is, like what you said, like, yes, it could be done, but then when families, when there's no, let's say there's no space at one school, and let's say they live like far, like around Thousand Oaks, and they come in, and then they applied, and the only school where we have capacity to assign that kid is at Willard, then they, like, the families are going to be driving all across town to send that kid, or vice versa. Let's suppose that a kid lives around the Claremont Hotel, and if we don't have spaces both at Longfellow or at King, I'm sorry, Longfellow or Willard, then that family is going to have to drive all the way to King. So it would be a transportation challenge that would have to be taken into consideration. So those are the things that I think about that. As far as, like, under any scenario, I can tell you that as we get closer and closer, is that we are going to be involving the special ed department and managers to make sure that that all of the things that whatever model the superintendent were to be recommending, that the students' IEPs are served at the schools in where they would be served, because that is a binding legal document that needs to be served. So I'm sure that the district will consult with the special department to make sure that that takes place. And Heather Cox, I agree with your comment about that. That the feeder schools, seems to be having a more transportation issue in yes, and that's something that we want to be transparent. And if there were to be transportation, please know that when you're talking about transportation, it means that there's cost associated with transportation under any scenario, like, whether it's an attendance zone for Longfellow. Like I said, I talked about express bus, but then having feeder schools, if that's why the district is looking into and the implications of transportation to any of the goals. Yeah, and having, just like you said, a dedicated attendance zone, it accomplishes the diversity goals of the district. So you're right on target with that.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a question from Eloise about an alternative. That would be the feeder school model, and maybe with a ranked choice. Do you see that, Mr. Martinez?
Mm-hmm.
So the question is there a way to do a neighborhood assignment, like a feeder school model, with an added ranked choice, so people feel like they still have folks feel like they still have a choice?
Eloise, I'm not going to respond to that. I'm gonna look into, think more a little bit about your thing to see how that could potentially be an option. But I need to digest it a little bit more and think about it. So I'm sorry, I don't have a response to you at this time.
But Eloise, what I'm going to say also is that I am putting that down as a suggested alternative to bring back to the superintendent as well. That is one of the things that we're doing. We're documenting all of these, and where, your suggestion will be heard. That's what I can say to you. We have a few other, oops, my screen just disappeared. We have a few other items in the Q&A. Oh, okay, great, thank you. Thinking of all of this, is there other additional information that you would find helpful as we move through this process, in addition to the items that Vicki just raised? Each of Berkeley's, communities, including the special education community, has its own, unique needs in many ways, and we want to make sure that we're aware of those and we're responsive as we continue to work with you and engage with the community. Make sure you get the information you're looking for if we can get it to you, and also make sure we understand and maybe anticipate some of the other things you may be interested in. Does anybody have any other questions or information they may be looking for?
So Eloise wants to speak. She said that she can verbalize better her point.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Eloise.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I totally miswrote that question because I forgot what the correct term you guys were using. It's not the feeder school model.
Oh, okay.
It was the model where you had the different, you had the districts cut up. I mean, the city of Berkeley cut up in 2 different colors and then added the green for, what was that model that you guys called it?
It's an attendance zone, having an attendance zone for Longfellow, just like we do for King and Willard. And
We're calling that the free zone
that's what
model.
I was trying to say. So like attendance zone, but then also giving the ranked choice. That's what I was trying to refer to.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I mistyped it.
And
That's all.
Okay. So I'm just going to speak it, like just on the top of my head, one of the things under that model, just like we do for the elementary schools, and I'm just going to use the elementary school zones to illustrate that point. Right now, we ask families to rank the elementary schools in their attendance zone. But there's some families who really want to rank schools outside of their attendance zone. And so how you rank your schools at the elementary school has an impact as to what school, because I always tell families and encourage them not to select in a school outside of their attendance zone as the #1 choice, because what happens is that when the lottery is run at the elementary school level, it is looking at the very first choice the parents have selected, but it gives more priority to the students that live in the attendance zone. So for instance, let's suppose that you live in the North Zone and want to go to Ruth Actie. I'm sorry, like you live in the Central Zone and want to go to Ruth Actie, which is in that school. Sometimes that school kind of gets full with first choice families who live in the attendance zone. So by the time we look at somebody from the attendance zone where they live, that choice, we never get to the first choice, because their first choice, it was taken by kids that live in Ruth Actie's North Zone, and then we look at the second choice kids that live in that zone, and the third choice zone, and then at the very end we look at kids that are requesting that school as a first choice. So it could potentially, my point is, it could potentially damage your choices of school when you're ranking them outside of the attendance zone, if you do that. So so we do it, but we do it at elementary school, and we always encourage families don't do it, because they're in essence giving their first choice away. And by the time we get to your second choice, we already have placed kids who requested that school that you want as a second choice. It was somebody else's first choice, and we already have placed them, so that you just get pushed down and down farther and on trying to get the school that you want. So that would be my response to your question, Eloise, and because we do it at elementary schools.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. I I just thought, like, it's easy to, say, okay, you're assigned to this school because you lived in this neighborhood. I get what you're saying. It's no big, yeah. It was just like a thought.
No,
'Cause
no,
you
no.
guys
It's like,
were
thank you
asking
for
what-
participating. I was kind of long-winded, but it's like I needed to explain because it's a long answer to it.
No, it makes sense. It makes good sense.
Okay, thanks.
I know that we are we're here until 7:30. If y'all have more questions and comments, what I'd like to do now is just share
Oops, sorry.
the a little bit more. First of all, this is if you did not take the quick poll that I placed in the chat a moment ago. This is the QR code if you have your smartphone handy. And the question is based right now on what you know about the alternatives. Do you have a preference? You can choose first choice, second choice, and third choice. It's ranked choice, it's anonymous. We're grateful for your feedback. And again, this is just a picture in time. You can change your opinion later. And so just to mention, and we really hope that you'll help us get the word out. We have 2 more of these town halls this month. We have a town hall for families of ELL students on Wednesday, October 13th at 6. And we have a town hall for families of African-American students on Thursday, October 14th at 6. They'll be similar to this evening. The format will be very similar, where we're going to provide the overview, background, and then take questions, and then get into the maps. But we wanted to create these spaces, these evenings for these groups in particular, because once again, we know some folks have very specific questions, and we wanted to make sure that we created the opportunity for folks to come and share and let us know what they're thinking. Does anybody have any other questions? No? In that case, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we really appreciate your spending this time with us this evening. Mr. Martinez, did you have anything else to add before we close this out?
Just have a good night.
Okay, great. Have a great night.
Yeah.
I'm going to copy this and then the Q&A to make sure I captured all of that. Okay. I think we're done.
Okay. I'll see you. Have a good day and good weekend. Good week. Okay.
Thank you.
Talk to you.
Okay. Bye-bye.